Hello everyone, Matt Carlyle here, and I am very looking forward to having a conversation with the man joining me today as guest. He's enjoyed a fantastic playing career, winning the League Cup with both Villa and Wolves, Dundee United, Notts County, West Brom, Rangers and Cheltenham, amongst other clubs. But most importantly, for me at least, he scored some very important goals in the history of Everton Football Club. So, Andy, thanks very much for the time. I know the world's certainly changed a lot since we last spoke. How's lockdown treating you?
It's getting a little bit easier here in Qatar. They're starting to ease restrictions. Golf course opened about 3 weeks ago, which was fantastic for us who play golf a lot here. Although it's a little hot, it's just about, I think it's about 43 today, 43 degrees. So a little bit in the hot side, but still it's great to get out on the golf course. Restaurants opened on the 1st of July. Beaches opened on the 1st of July. Some hotels opened on the 1st of July. So they've eased restrictions, but there's still a few things in, but they've been quite good. They've got very few active cases here in Qatar. I think about 7,000. Although they've had a lot of infections, the vast majority have recovered quickly because it's a very young population, apart from me and Keezy. It's a very young population here in Qatar. So they seem to, recover quite quickly, and we've only had about just over 100 deaths. So all in all, I think that the country's coped okay. It's been a bit hard for me because I've obviously been without the family for about 5 months. I haven't seen my kids, haven't been able to get back to England. And my wife, when this started, was back in England. So she's really not been able to get back to Qatar, really. So I've missed seeing the family, but hopefully that will change when the season finishes. But we're okay. There are worse places to be suffering lockdown, yeah.
I'm glad to hear you're doing okay, at least. And just to give a bit of context for the listeners and the viewers, I last spoke to you around, I think it was November last year, at the premiere for Howard's Way. Initially, it was a lounge in Goodison where members of the media would go in, and it would be like a sort of a carousel sort of things where players take a table each and then move on. And you were the last of the players to reach our table. And just as you sat down and you were getting mic'd up, there was the last call to say, right, we're winding up now, let's all get a move on. And I think your partner in crime up front, Graham Sharp, was tugging on your sleeve, getting you to hurry up. And you said to me, do you mind? And I was like, no, don't worry about it. And you were like, I'll find you at St. George's later on in the evening. And so fast forward later on in the evening, and the place was absolutely packed, full of experienced journalists and presenters, if you will. And the fact that you'd take the time out to come and find me and talk to me when it was absolutely shocking, relatively early on in my career, I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Not at all, much pleasure.
Great. So when we last spoke, one of the things that stuck with me was the fact that you said, obviously, it's hard not to talk about all the important goals, especially in cup finals. And the thing that stuck with me was you said you'd always dreamt as a boy to score in an FA Cup final. In terms of your ambitions growing up in Glasgow, was it always to make it professionally in England?
Well, it was to make it professionally, and I never knew if I was going to make it in England or what kind of standard I was going to play to. That obviously I did, but I had 3 older brothers. And we were all football mad. And if I'm being honest with you, out of all 4 of us, if I was to take a snapshot of, let's say, when we were 16, all of us, and say how good we were, I would have been bottom. My 3 older brothers at 16 would have all been better than me. But for whatever reason, for various reasons, family reasons, and, a couple of them didn't want to do it. One of them did play professional for Clydebank and was playing well, but decided to emigrate to Canada. So bang went his professional career. So I guess it was left to me and the family to fulfill all of our dreams. But they were all good footballers, my brothers, and they kind of channeled all their ambitions into me. And it was left to me to pick up the baton and run with it. And I did. And yes, in those days, the only live football we saw in Scotland, basically, was this FA Cup final. It was out on every year. There was a day made of it, obviously. You can remember, I'm sure even you can remember being a young man, that, you know, when the FA Cup final was when it was in its height, it would start at 9 o'clock in the morning and you'd be at the players' hotels. I remember them coming to our hotel down London before we played Watford, and we had Freddie Starr on the ground entertaining us at 9 o'clock in the morning. So we watched all that all day. I always had visions of playing in an FA Cup final at Old Wembley, and of course scoring a goal and winning it. So to finally achieve that with Everton, and then Everton having gone so long without winning the FA Cup, what was it,
16 years at the time, something like that. Yeah,
16, 18 years, I think it was, wasn't it? 16, 18 years, something like that. It was brilliant. And I know my goal was never a classic, and I don't care, because all it says on the history books is scorers sharp and grey. Doesn't give you a description of how the goal was scored. Thank goodness.
They all count.
Yeah, that was a pretty special moment. Yeah,
definitely. As you say, in terms of your development, that shocked me quite a fair bit. That you say you were sort of the less technically gifted as your brothers, because I think it was 76, 77 when you won both Players Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year. I think only Cristiano Ronaldo and Gareth Bale can lay claim to that. So you're certainly in company there.
I am in good company.
But something that I wanted to ask you about as well, which I found particularly interesting, as somebody, I think particularly through my teenage years, I was really unfortunate when it comes to injuries. I'm talking as somebody that's had a hamstring surgery and more knee dislocations than I care to remember. One of the things that stuck with me, especially from watching Howard's Way, the film, did you really burn half your injury records when you signed for Everton?
Yeah, I did. True story, yeah. I like you, had a lot of injuries and played a lot of football with injuries. But I remember it was at the time when this would never have been allowed any time. It wouldn't have been allowed then. But because Wolves was in a bad state, it was going into administration, or had gone into administration. So no one was really in control of anything. And when I got the call that Everton, Howard Kendall wanted to have a chat with me, and they says that the deal could go through, so would you mind taking your records up? I said, no, I'll do that, no problem. And I went up on the Thursday. Thursday afternoon, I went in to collect them at Molineux, and was flabbergasted to find a stack of medical records. And I thought, bloody hell, I can't take that up to Goodison. They'll never sign me if I walk through the door with a bunch of medical records that thick. So I went home that night, and I had a big open fire in the house I was living in just outside Wolverhampton then. And it was burning away nicely, and I thought, no, I've got to do something. So I sat there all night, and I went through the records. I went, well, that's okay. No, fire. That's okay. No, fire. Oh, fire. Oh, fire. So I ended up with something that thick when I went up. I gave it to Doc Irwin, and I'll never forget the look in his face. And we spoke about it, obviously, on the after that. He said to me one day after I'd signed, he says, I can't believe your records, it's always getting to me. How come? And then I eventually told him the story, and he was laughing his socks off. Yeah, I was pretty determined that the move was going to go through, because I knew I was okay. I knew I was okay here. Mm-hmm. And that was the main thing. And I knew I had a dodgy knee that I'd been operated on 6 times. But I also know that I'd sort of played with discomfort, certainly for an awful lot of my career. That never bothered me. And I was happy to do so. And as long as Everton wanted that, then I wasn't going to let some medical records stop me signing for the Toffees, no.
Good man. And I believe that was 83, wasn't it, around the time when you signed for Everton? And you've obviously got a great track record for winning things, but at that time it wasn't all champagne and trips to Wembley. Howard Kendall, the gaffer, certainly seemed to be under a great deal of pressure. the allure of signing for Everton? Because I met Howard, albeit later on in his life, and he still, even at that later age in his life, he seemed to have an air of respectability about him.
Well, for me, it was easy. I was at a club that was in administration, was going nowhere but down. I was asked to join a club who, listen, I knew Everton. I knew the history of Everton. I knew the history of the number 9s. Being a centre forward myself, you always know that. You know, there were special clubs who had number 9s, Everton, Newcastle in particular, the two massive clubs who the number 9 was something special through history. And then I met Howard. I'd played against Howard a couple of years previously when he was at his latter years at Birmingham City. I remember playing against Howard when I was a kid as well. But then I met him, and I took to him right away. He was a man's man. He was just retired as a footballer, so he talked players' language. But he also had a deep desire to achieve something. And listen, it was an easy decision for me. He said, I want you to sign. I'd like you to come up. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm done. No problem. We met in the Queen's Head on Queen's Drive, and I remember it. We had lunch, and we agreed the deal. We said, that's it, yeah. And the next morning, I went up on the Friday, signed on the Friday, and for me to play on the Saturday against Nottingham Forest, I think it was, we had to sign a loan deal. So I had to sign loan forms. I couldn't sign the contract. Otherwise, if I'd have signed the contract, I wouldn't have been able to play on the Saturday. So we signed a loan deal, which could have gone, I mean, when you think about it now, I could have signed for a loan deal, got clobbered on the Saturday, you know, I broke my leg or something like that, and Howard would have gone, oh, sorry, thanks very much, Andy, but we won't have you now. I don't need somebody. But that could have happened. But we were both happy to take that risk because I knew Everton, we needed a result somewhere. And I needed to play again and get going, and I wanted to get going quickly. So it was done and dusted on that day. I had the medical. My knee was swollen a bit at the medical. I remember that because I think I'd played, it's strange, I'd played on the Wednesday for Wolves in a League Cup tie against Preston or something like that. I mean, of all the things to do that cost me, obviously, a chance of playing in the League Cup for Everton that year when we went to the final. But my knee was like swollen. The doc said to me, oh, that's a bit of fluid on that, Andy. I said, yeah, it always is, doc. I said, after I've played, I said, I'll be okay. Said, so if we don't sign you today, what will you be doing tomorrow? I said, I'll be playing for Wolves. He went, oh, okay, that's good enough for me. So as it happens, we played Nottingham Forest, and I played with Inchy that day, and he'd been struggling. And I remember saying to him, listen, we'll get you a goal today, definitely. I said, just whenever the ball comes in the penalty area, get yourself near me. Get yourself around me. And I guarantee you, sometime in the game, I'll set up something for you. And sure enough, luckily enough, I managed to set up a chance for him. He took it. We won 1-0. And that didn't change things, but it was an important moment because it steadied the ship a little bit.
Yeah, nice. And something that is greatly credited for sort of turning the tides around that time was the introduction of yourself and Peter Reid, which I find very interesting because I, for better or worse, I've got an obsession with the psychology of winners in sports, which often makes me feel like I was born in the wrong era to be an Evertonian, to be honest with you. But it's often the case that with new players coming into a club, the players that have been there for longer often help them acclimatise rather than roles reversed. So which players did you feel like once you've arrived at Goodison, did you see their leadership qualities grow?
Well, leaders are different. You know, there are leaders that do things certain ways. I mean, there's no doubt that Reedy, I hope I'm not blowing my own trumpet, and I don't like to, but there is no doubt that Peter Reid and my personality and drive and hatred of losing, rather than be winners sometimes, I always think I hated losing. And so did Reedy. And we had an affinity about that, the two of us. And it was a young team. If you look around that team, you know, Neville was a young goalkeeper. Chris Stevens was a young right back. Derek Mountfield, Kevin Ratcliffe. John Bailey was experienced, but Bales, you wouldn't say Bales was a leader, but he came along with you. You know what I mean? He was infectious. You wanted him on your side. You wanted to be around him. You know, then you had people like Trevor Stephen, young. You know, Kevin Richardson, young. Alan Harper, young. Kevin Sheedy, young. Graham Sharp, young. These were all boys in their early 20s. So, you know, when you talk about leaders, the leadership in the end came from Howard and Colin, Mick Heaton. And on the pitch, it came from, I think, genuinely Reedy and I. Mm-hmm. But what the others did, Kevin Ratcliffe became a great leader very quickly as captain and the most successful captain. But others, you know, Gary wasn't a leader, Gary Stevens, neither was Derek. Brace wasn't a leader, but Brace went on the pitch and led by what he did on the football pitch. He wasn't vocal too much, just got on with his job. Trevor was quiet, Kevin was quiet, you know that. Sharpie was a quiet lad. But they all grew, and Graham Sharp, particularly because I played alongside him, he went from scorer of great goals. I always say that about what was a change in Graham. Was before I got there, I always used to watch clips of Graham Sharp and think, wow, he was smashing them in from 25 yards and 40 yards and ridiculous goals. He was a scorer of great goals. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a great goal scorer. So it was important he became that, and he did. You know, I used to say to him, listen, you only get one for it if you tap it in from 6 yards out, Graham. If you get in that 6 yard box a bit more, you're going to get another 10, 15 goals a season, I guarantee it. They might only be tap-ins, but they all count. Mm-hmm. And he grew, and I think they all grew. And I think we would have all gone that extra yard for each other. That's what the team grew into. It really was a team. And if someone was in trouble, there's absolutely no doubt someone went and helped. And then we introduced Pat Van den Hal. And we all know what Pat's like. He was just, you know, he'd done anything to win a football match. And I think that was it. So we weren't a team full of leaders, but we had a brilliant team ethic about us. And no one liked losing. No one. And that, I think that's what the young boys grew up sampling. That losing didn't really taste very nice. Winning tasted a whole lot better. And then they took it on. Yeah, they went on from there and they won the league. Got to the League Cup final. And losing that, in many ways, was part of their growing up. Because I remember going to the FA Cup final and saying to a couple of them, remember how you felt a couple of months ago? You don't want to feel like that again here. This is even worse. Losing the FA Cup final would be even worse, although it was Liverpool, so it probably wasn't worse. But losing the League Cup was worse, and losing it against Liverpool, it felt horrible. Trust me, you'll feel just as bad if we lose this FA Cup today. And I think the lads grew into that. And the FA Cup was a big catalyst for what happened the next 3 or 4 years.
It certainly resonates with me, and I'd agree that seems like a key moment in kicking things on. You talked about Graham there and a bit of his playing style. I'm 21 years old. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see that side play. Going back and watching some clips of yourself and other players, yourself in particular, would you say it's a fair assessment to compare your playing style with someone like a Tim Cahill, sort of like heart on the sleeve, and you know, really gives their all for the team and a great goal scorer and that, or does someone else come to mind in the modern game when?
No, I don't. I think Tim is probably Tim and Graham and people. Tim Cahill was a different. He played in a different position from me. He was more a number 10 than he was a number 9. But I think because he was he was only about my height. We were both just short of 6 feet, but we could both head the ball incredibly well. And I think that, especially when we were at Everton, and I think a lot of Evertonians put those two things together. You know, we weren't big lads. We weren't 6'2", 6'3", but we could probably head the ball better than anyone at the club at the time. And I think they put that together. But no, I don't see any similarities between. I mean, if he wore his heart on his sleeve, Tim, then fine. I did that. I played every game like that. But we were very different footballers. He was probably more gifted, crafted, creative. Where I was a centre forward. I mean, call it old-fashioned if you like. I was a centre forward who led the line. I don't think Tim ever led the line as such. So I kind of led the line, and I was the focal point, and a lot of attacks started with me, and a lot finished with me. So I think the ability to head a ball, definitely, there's a comparison there, a huge comparison that I think we would both be happy to acknowledge. And the fact that if he wanted to win as badly as you say, then that is definitely is a similarity. But we were very different footballers, I think, very different.
Okay. Does any other sort of modern footballer, doesn't have to be Everton related, spring to mind when thinking of your own playing style?
I mean, if you were to say to me who in the Premier League era and played the game the sort of same way you did, I would have to think people like Alan Shearer played like me, but he was even his early Premier League. When you get to now, the game has moved on to such an extent now that has. I mean, if I was looking through Premier League and the style and how they went about it, you know, people like Shearer would definitely have been up there. Mark Hughes, these players who were front men. Didier Drogba was a leader of the line. You know, they led the line. I'm not saying I was as good as them, but that kind of player would have been me. Definitely in that respect. So if you were to say that, probably players like that would be, if you didn't see me play, I was like them. I was probably a little bit more, I was going to say physical, but no, Alan was hugely physical, so was Drogba, so was Mark Hughes. Yeah, but those ones I've all mentioned, they were all physical footballers as well. They could handle themselves in an era when you didn't get as much protection as they do now.
Okay, I think that's a good comparison. Just sort of back to the mentality of winners and that sort of desire. I'm sure you'd agree that a winner's mentality isn't something that you can just turn on and off, and it doesn't just appear on a Saturday afternoon when you put your boots on. It's something that's instilled day to day through training. What was the atmosphere like at Belfield during your spell at Everton?
Brilliant.
Yeah,
it was a fun place to be. I mean, when I say it's a fun place to be, after the first sort of 2 or 3 months after the turn of the year, when we beat Stoke in the FA Cup, one of the big major turning points in the January. From there, it became a really fun place to be. Howard always made it so. Howard and Colin, they always made it. They never made training dull. They never made it boring. There was always a laugh. There was always time for a laugh. But I mean, head tennis was renowned there. We had a little pitch there where Howard and Colin regarded themselves as the best head tennis players around. And there would always be competition in the head tennis before training started. The guys would be out there. The dressing room was a lively place, as you might imagine, with the characters that were in there. You know, it was a lively dressing room. But I don't think anybody who was there would have swapped it for anywhere else. We looked after each other. We had fun when we knew we could have fun. And I think that dressing room was a case where there's a time and a place for work, and there's a slot somewhere where you can have a little bit of enjoyment in there. And Howard got that right. When we were working, and we worked really hard. You did, without working really, and being dedicated to your sport and being dedicated to your club. You have to be these things, or you don't win what we won. But there was also room for a bit of, you know, lightness about it. You know, the legendary Chinese meals that Howard used to take us for every now and again. You know, if he felt that maybe things had just dropped off a little bit, or there was one or two little arguments that needed to be sorted out, we'd disappear up to Southport for the Chinese and spend the afternoon together having a couple of beers at the right time. You know, if we weren't playing till the Saturday, we'd be up there on a Monday night or a Monday afternoon. So we'd be plenty of time to recover. You know, it wasn't like we went on a Friday afternoon and then went out and played on a Saturday. So, but that didn't happen often. There's a lot talked about that. I can remember maybe three times in the couple of years I was there where we went for a Chinese and sorted a few things out. But because we were being so successful, it wasn't necessarily much. But every now and again, but there was a good mix. We knew when to enjoy ourselves and we knew when work was work.
Great to hear. And the film by Rob Sloman, Everton, Howard's Way, I think especially for someone like myself, I absolutely adore it and I've seen it several times over. Do you think that captured the culture of the club well during that time?
Yeah, it did. I thought Rob captured it brilliantly. I mean, I can remember I think it must have been 7, 8 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when Rob first called me to say he had this idea about a movie about Howard. He felt that that team hadn't received the respect it deserved. And that was music to my ears. And, he just said, I need some help contacting people, no problem. And he started off and he went, and I think he did a brilliant job. I hadn't seen it until that night I met you at St. George's. I deliberately didn't want to watch any of it till that night. Rob had said to me, I can send you a copy if you want. I said, no, I want to wait till the night. And I think he did Howard justice. Yeah.
Definitely. That's great to hear. And just to sort of push this in another direction, a high school friend of mine, obviously pandemic aside, is set to move to Doha, I believe, around August time. And he's been given the green light by the club to start up an official Everton supporters club in Doha. So I promised that I'd mention it to you, and I'm sure he'd be really glad if you could show your face there when it opens.
Yes, well, you know where to get me, and tell him to look me up when he gets here. I'll be more than happy to pop round. I popped round. They've got a Rangers supporters club here. A couple of pals that I know are members. Obviously, I was a born and bred Rangers fan, and have been. So I popped in to see them a couple of times as well, say hello. So when he gets here, not a problem. Just tell me, get in contact, and I'll pop and see him.
Brilliant. And I was going to say, people like yourself who have sort of been the faces of football broadcasting and analysis over the last couple of years really did sort of help define the career path.
You see, a couple of years.
A long time. So,
well, listen, it actually feels like a couple of years, but try 30. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I was going to say, you're obviously in Qatar now with beIN. And it's really impressive to see the sort of football culture that's emerged from Qatar over the last couple of years. Obviously, with the bid for the World Cup, and now with beIN, the studio guests that you get in, the likes of Wenger and Mourinho, they're the type of people that you could listen talk about football all day. How have you found them being one of the faces of that sort of revolution of football in that part of the world?
Well, it's been great. We kind of had the revolution in England in 1992 when the Premier League started. That totally changed the way we watched football and the way we looked at it. So I'd already sampled that, when we got here, what is it now, over 7 years ago. And, we're given the opportunity to do here what we had done in the UK. It was a fantastic opportunity for Richard and I. And as you say, the quality of guests that come and see us, and it's great because it keeps you fresh. We have this. Sadly, the pandemic's put paid to that, and we don't know when we'll be getting our guests back again. That's the only problem. We can only do them remotely at the moment, which isn't the same. But the quality of guests coming in every weekend just to freshen me up, keep us fresh, was fantastic. And I've become good friends with a lot of people. We've spent, as you said, a lovely afternoon with Arsene Wenger, just in a hotel across the water here. The last time he was in, a fascinating dinner lunch with him. It was great, and his company was fantastic. Josie the same. Ruud Hullit's a good pal. He comes here regularly. I love to see Ruud, but we haven't seen the boys for a while now, and we don't know when we'll see them again. But to start that off, knowing that you've got the World Cup coming up in, what was it then, 10 years? 10 years from when we joined here. Was a big incentive for Richard and I. We were, it's a huge audience we have worldwide. This is not just beIN Sports Qatar. beIN Sports goes from New Zealand to America. So it's a massive operation. And it's been brilliant to be part of. It's been a lovely place to live. I wake up in the sunshine every day, pretty much. It does rain 5 or 6 days a year. That's about it. And I'm looking forward to, the World Cup when the pandemic settles, and we can look forward to the World Cup arriving on these shores. Stadiums are looking amazing, absolutely amazing. They're fabulous works of art, as well as football stadiums. When people see them, they'll be astonished how lovely they are. And the people are very proud of what they're doing and what they've been allowed to do. And I think anyone who comes in to watch the World Cup will have a fabulous experience. That's my hope anyway.
I'd like to think so, most definitely. And just to get a sort of some of your opinions on Everton at the moment. I mean, we're recording this on the 10th, a few days after a rather uninspiring 1-0 defeat away to Tottenham Hotspur, which really does seem typical of Everton's problems over the last decade or so. Really, that sort of failure to rise to the occasion in the big games. Just obviously, Carlo Ancelotti's come in, and things do look promising in that respect. But as an ex-player and obviously such a keen analyst of the game, where do you think, what direction do you think Everton are going in as a football club?
I don't know if we're going in. Well, first and foremost, the big pluses were obviously Carlo. I said at the time, if Ancelotti comes and he really wants to work hard at it, because he's going to have to work hard at it, we know that. You know, Liverpool and Man City have set the benchmark here, and if Everton are ever going to get anywhere near that, then they're going to have to work really hard, both on and off the pitch. And I think if Carlo has come here with his mojo intact and ready to do it, then we've got a fantastic coach, one of the best in the world. There's no doubt about it. You just have to look at his CV that tells you that. Now, I think in the way we've played, there has been improvement. I think that the way they're going about the game is better. It's more, what's the word I would look for? It's more progressive now. We're getting through the pitch quicker. We seem to be getting the ball from back to front quicker without just lumping it, but getting it there, getting it in good areas. We're not quite finishing it off. But we're a little, I don't know. I watched us in midweek there against, well, a couple of days ago, as you say, against Spurs. I was really disappointed. I thought that the quality of our midfield that night was really poor, really poor. And we've got some really good players in there, you know, players that have cost an awful lot of money. So I think what we'll do this season is we get over this season, whatever it gives us now. I mean, two of our worst performances since Carlo came in were in London, both at Chelsea and at Tottenham, which I don't know if there's anything in that. Would hate to think so, but they were arguably the two worst performances I've seen from Everton since Ancelotti came in. I was really flat the other day because I expected so much more against a pretty ordinary Tottenham side. And I was really flat that we didn't do that we didn't perform. But I think what we need to give Carlo is certainly this summer. I don't know what the transfer window is going to be like now. No one does with this COVID-19. But I think if he can get in some players he wants to come and fit into what he wants to do, and when I say a couple, I'm talking if we can get in 4, right? Quality players that he knows, that he wants. I know that's not easy, but listen, we've got to aim big. We're told we have money now. We're told we have a lot of money in the club to spend. Let's start spending it. I'm not saying spend 100 million in one player, but I'm saying get 4 real good quality players in that Carlo likes and Carlo wants to work with, and let's start moving forward. Listen, we're never going to get there in one jump. This is going to take time. But what we can do is make big leaps. Instead of going up one step, one rung of the ladder, let's go up 3 or 4 at a time. And then start moving forward. But I won't judge us. I don't think I'm going to judge us too much this season. But I'll be looking at the beginning of the next season and think, right, you've had 6 months, Carlo, to have a look at the players. I think that's important. Who you want to keep, who you don't. Who knows what you want? Who knows how you go about it? So if you want to stay and play for me and work for me, you can stay. If not, you can go. I'll get my own players in and then we'll start. So I think I'll start judging Everton a bit more at the beginning of the next season rather than at the end of this one.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the transfer and incumbents, I think that would be financial fair play impending. But, you know, as you say, you'd like to see some real quality come in and quality that the manager wants to work with. 2 of the real positives during Carlo Ancelotti's time at Everton since he's come is obviously he's reverted to that 4-4-2 formation, which has really seemed to have brought the best out of Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And I was wondering, if you had the choice to be your strike partner, who would you rather partner up front?
Of those 2?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's a difficult one. They're very different in how they go about the game. I mean, I suppose for the right mix, I'd look at Richarlison as a more crafted player, as more number 10 than a 9, and maybe a 9.5. who would be the one who would link up things, who would go and do things, whereas Dominic would be more like myself at the top end, right up the front end, leading the line, as I call it, as we've said again. He's a more traditional centre-forward, Dominic, than Richarlison. And Richarlison would be a bit like Brian Little was for me at Villa, who was a very different player. John Richards at Wolves. Graham and I sort of broke the mould. We were very similar types of players, and that we both wanted to play at the top end, but we were clever enough to work it out. So I think I could play with both. I think Dominic's pace would be an asset to my no pace. But I think for somebody to create things for me, then probably Richarlison would be the better foil for me.
Okay, fair shout. I mean, I think that would be a partnership that Evertonians would certainly get excited by. Andy, listen, I really appreciate the time, and I'm thankful that I've got the chance to talk with you again. And just for the people listening and the people watching, I believe that you're on the podcast scene yourself now. No,
we're not at the moment. We dipped a toe in the water, not quite. We're just putting a few things together. We are thinking of, Richard and I are thinking of joining the podcast world, but we might leave it till the beginning of next season before we come out in full blast. We did put a podcast out, I think, a couple of weeks ago, just to see how it would be received and how it looked and how we felt it went. And we're having discussions about that now. But yeah, hopefully, yes, we will be on the podcast scene soon, but not just yet.
Okay, cool. And I certainly enjoyed the episode, and I do look forward to more coming out if it is the case. So I'd just like to say again, Andy, thanks for your time. It means a lot.
Thanks, Max. It's been an absolute pleasure.